Thank you very much, Bree. Welcome everyone. Thanks for hanging out to the ENDA conference. I hope we make it worth your time. My name is Rebekkah Smith-Aldrich. I'm the Executive Director of the Mid-Hudson Library System, but I spent 20 years of my career as a public library consultant, often helping libraries win at the polls, whether it's a regular operating budget, a building referendum, or a conversion to some type of sustainable funding to really solidify the future of a library. And the panel that you have here today are some of my favorite people on the face of the earth. Their stories are very memorable. And I just, before we introduce them, wanted to give them that shout out because what they've gone through literally has been hard-won knowledge that you're going to share with you here today. And in some cases, they've been through the ringer. It's been brutal and emotional and probably one of the toughest things they've done in their career. And so they're here today to take their time, their precious time and energy to share with you what they learned through the experience of going out to the polls, asking the public to support them in doing something, having that shot down and having to figure out what to do next. So I think today we're going to be talking about big votes, right? Building referendum or major sustainable funding shifts that these library directors have attempted to lead their libraries forward during. And what we're going to do is hear from each panelist about their backstory, doing like a little condensed backstory for you. And then we're going to do an interview style panel for you. So you get the best and the brightest of their experience that you can learn from, whether or not you also have been part of a campaign that's gone down, or if you know that you've got a campaign in the future that you want to, make sure you do your best on. And it's, I think also a lesson here for today, sometimes it's totally out of your control. So without further ado, I'm really pleased to introduce our panel here today. You've got Tim Wiles, whose bright idea this whole panel was. So Tim, thanks so much. We're glad to be here today. We've got Matthew Bollerman, the CEO of the Hauppauge Public Library. Julie Kelsall-Dempsey, right here in the Mid-Hudson Library System from the Highland Public Library. Lisa Kropp, who's the director of the Lindenhurst Memorial Library, and Pauline Emery from the Southeast Stuben County Public Library. And so once again, welcome panelists. Thank you for being here. So we're going to kick off by asking each panelist to share their backstory, just to give the audience some context, so you know what their background is and what their experience was. We're going to start today with Tim telling his once upon a time story. They're each going to take about 2 minutes, so hang in there. We'll get through all 5 of them. Tim, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
Okay, well, I'm glad that you did some research and found a fun picture of me there on the roof of our library. We have a 1-story library. Guilderland is a community of 36,000 people, immediate western suburb of Albany, part of the Upper Hudson Library System. And in our particular case, in 2012, when I was not yet the director, we failed a public referendum 3-1. It was a $13 million project, and it would have doubled the library from 28,000 square feet to twice that. And it was kind of a crushing loss. I was a member of the Library Foundation at the time. And we'll talk later about reacting to those losses. But for many of us, we were surprised that we lost. We were also surprised that we lost 3-1 instead of a close vote. After that vote, I don't know that there was any connection, but a couple of years after that vote, our director decided to retire. And so there was an opening and I became the director in January of 2014. And in 2019, 5 years later, we did another referendum for an expansion project that is 6,500 square feet. So roughly half the size of the previous expansion, which had failed. And we did win that one 60-40 at the referendum in March of 2019. So in our particular case, part of the reason for our success was scaling back to something that seemed achievable and doable. As a quick aside, you could have gotten, our patrons could have gotten about 25,000 square feet in 2012 for $13 million, and they're now getting 6,500 square feet in 2020 for $9 million. So on a per square foot cost, our community is getting less than it could have gotten, but we do need the expansion and we are happy that it's here.
Cool, thank you so much, Tim. Next up is Matt from the Hauppauge Public Library.
Thanks, Rebekkah. Thanks for having me on the panel. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the most hellish time of my life. The Hauppauge Public Library was formed in 2000. That's right, you heard it. We're a very new library, formed in 2000. We were a special district library. And at the time that the library was founded, they decided that the best approach would be to lease space. So they took their time to decide on what was deemed the permanent home for the Hauppauge Public Library. They searched high and low of existing buildings and land out there, and after a long and exhaustive search, they bought a piece of property from the town of Islip, where we're located in a park, 1 acre, and they decided that's where the future home was going to be. The library undertook a very long and very public, we invited the public in design process, and we went out to vote with really a beautiful building, and really off the charts type of situation that we developed, and we lost at the bond. We lost at the bond vote by 30 votes, so it went down by 30 votes. So we regrouped, came back, dropped $2 million from the project, came back to the community, and we had more yes votes, yay us, but 250 more no votes. So we lost again. So what you're seeing here on the slide are pictures of the new leased space, which I'll talk about a little bit more. And that's what we wound up doing. We wound up kind of regrouping, looking again, coming back and leasing a space for 30 years. We have 27 more years to go. And it's been fantastic. Best experience of my entire life. So thank you for having us relive this.
You're so welcome. Anytime, man. All right, Julie, you're up.
Hi, it's Julie Kelsall-Dempsey from the Highland Public Library in the Mid-Hudson library system. We're right across the river and the walkway from Poughkeepsie, and our other neighbor is New Paltz. So we actually have been in the old building from 1930. We were chartered in 1921, started as a women's reading group of 1915. The old building was a Victorian house. It was 2,900 square feet. It was a lovely house. It was not a very lovely library. It was very overcrowded. They had actually been, when we got our school district, when we became a school district public library, it was actually written at that time in 1986 that the building was too small for the community. I wasn't there at that time, but I did spend over 20 years looking at every piece of property that came available in Highland, and trying to cultivate a board that was willing to also go out to the public and ask them to bond for a new building. And finally, in 2010, we did go out. We had found a 2-story, 14,000 square foot existing building on the rail trail, which people thought was great, but we lost by 91 votes. So we regrouped, new board came on, and we started the process again in 2013 and went out again March 17th, luck of the Irish, 2015, and we passed a bond with 277 votes. And the new building, brand new building, not a renovation, opened in January 2018. It was smaller. It was 10,250 square feet as opposed to the 14,000 square foot 2-story building. And it was $2 million less than the original bond, but we did get it, so.
Thanks, Julie. And I have to say, if you get a chance to visit Julie's library, it's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you, Rebekkah.
All right, Lisa, you're up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So quickly, I just wanted to start with our inception, which I found interesting. Back in 1946, Lindenhurst started as an association library. It then became a village library, and by 1964, it was a school district public library. And they had a bond for $757,000 in 1967, which built the current building that I am sitting in. Well, not really, I'm in the annex, and it's 23,000 square feet. And that opened in 1969. We serve 42,000 residents, so 23,000 square feet. Even then, we were already, in my opinion, tight and small. I joined the staff as the assistant director in November 2015 when the library director and the board were looking to hire and do an RFP for new architectural proposals. So by the end of 2016, we had 2 building options out there that were created like Matt's with community and staff input. The first option, considered like a one and done plan, was going to renovate the existing building completely, add 10,000 square feet, and it had a price tag of $14.9 million. And the second option was going to add approximately 6,000 square feet, and that was a $12 million price tag. So the board decided to move the larger plan forward, thinking it would be our first bond referendum in over 50 years, and in the long run would be the least expensive option to address the list of needs. We had no ADA accessibility bathrooms, safety issues, no fire sprinklers, no elevator for ADA, that type of thing. The library director at the time announced his decision to retire at the end of 2017, and the referendum vote was planned for that October. What do they say about the best laid plans? So in a nutshell, the chosen firm had been involved in a failed referendum with the village fire department in 2008. And I didn't realize this until the night of our first community forum, when the mayor expressed his extreme displeasure with the board president. Ouch. I thought if we were required to hold one public information meeting, that 12 or more public information meetings would be far better and more transparent, right, to the community. And then the school district was also planning a bond referendum in October, and theirs was a zero cost bond because of retiring debt service. So we thought if we just pushed ours until November, about 6 weeks away from theirs, it wouldn't be considered in competition. And that's how I wound up watching voters defeat the $14.9 million proposition, 683 no votes to 521 yes votes. And spoiler alert, on the screen, you can see we did regroup, we did pass another referendum, and we'll talk about that a little bit more.
Great, thank you, Lisa. And last but not least, Pauline.
Hello. So the Southeast Stuben County Library is an association library. Some of you might have known that the Corning Public Library closed in 1999. They had had a failed vote for a district library, special district library. So that should have been more on our radar. So as the Southeast Stuben County Library, we received municipal funding from, at the time, or previously, from 7 municipalities. We lost one. We saw the writing on the wall. We knew we were going to start losing with every negotiation of our contracts with our municipalities. And we also knew that we had a time frame of 2 years to have a secure and stable funding model. So we did a 259 and we went out and we lost. There was like 2,741 voters and we lost by 281 votes. So we had to go back to the drawing board. We have a population, we serve a population of 36,000. And the interesting thing about our communities is we have a small city, but then we're surrounded by many rural communities. And those were the communities that really were having a hard time seeing what the value was in having a library and supporting it with their tax dollars. So we went out again in 2015, and we just put our all into it. The turnout from 2,700, the voter turnout was like 4,481, and we won by 825 votes. So I felt good about the second time around.
I think a little more than good.
Yes, really happy.
So I'll just say, in my career, I've assisted and observed over 126 now library referendums in New York State. And these are the ones that keep me up at night when I think about the heart and soul and all of the people who worked to get up onto the ballot and get there and put yourselves out there and ask for that money. And to have it defeated it can feel soul crushing. And I have to say, for each of you, and I think, Tim, I didn't know you as well at the time, but the other 4 of you, watching you pick yourselves up and figure how to dust yourself off and keep going was really, it was a superhuman effort that I watched from all of you. And I think that's what people are really interested to hear about today, which is, how did you find that motivation to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over again? Tim, do you mind starting?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, you know, we didn't even know that we were going to try that. I'll talk a little bit more about that in one of our subsequent questions. But as I mentioned, we had a change in our administration, and I became the director. And I mentioned earlier that I was a member of the foundation when we lost the referendum 3-1, but I really wasn't, I was a new member of the foundation and I didn't know many of the staff and so forth. When I came aboard in January of 2014, so about 18 months after we lost the referendum, it was still mentioned in pretty much every board meeting, and it was clearly palpable. And I think what we did is we just put it behind us and began to work on library services and on other things that we needed to do. And for a while, we didn't think about any referendums or expansions. And then later we came to a significant anniversary, which I'll talk about later, and launched a new program. So,
Matt, how about you? How'd you dust yourself off?
Sorry about that. How do we dust ourselves off? Well, by losing by 30 votes, definitely was a motivator to say, well, maybe if we were able to do a few things, we can do that better and get the message out again and all the rest. So the board was very motivated and the staff was motivated, said, hey, we were that close. Let's do some surveying. Let's take some assessment of the project. Let's maybe reduce the cost. Let's try it again, because we weren't clear exactly why the community was against the project. So we weren't sure if it was the location or the price. So we decided, well, we'll stick with the location. We'll go for the price, we'll reduce the price and we'll try that. And then obviously the no's came up again and knocked us down. So after the second time we lost, I would say that moving forward was very challenging. I think we had all put just about everything we had in the tank into that second vote. And when you come out of it again and get rejected that way, it was very hard. But we were in a lease, and that lease it had a 2-year lead time to terminate the lease. So we had said, let's terminate the lease. So we were working on trying to find a new space. So we had to kind of keep going, or else we were going to be a homeless library. And that's hard to serve people from, is my understanding. So we decided we tried to find that space, and that kept us going. So, but it was hard. It was definitely, there were a number of months where we just kind of didn't do much because it was just hard to kind of get your head off the ground.
Julie, how about you?
I agree. It's one of the hardest things to do. It's not easy to come back. You put everything into it. So there's like almost a grieving process of, you gave it your all and what happened. And ours happened, our first vote was in December. It was December 14th. So that was a lovely holiday season. And the board didn't regroup. I mean, that night, obviously, we discussed things, and I think we met briefly right after that. And then we met again after the holidays, and the board didn't want to go back and try that for that building again. They didn't want to do anything again. At the time, we had a 5-person board. After that referendum, we expanded the board to 7 because of how much work is involved with getting a referendum done, and the board needs to do work to help as well. But the board members at that time, most of them left the board right after, or went by that June, they had left because they felt they had given everything they could. They were viewed in the Highland, if you're not living here your entire life, you're as an outsider, no matter how long you've lived here. I've lived here over 30 years. My mother grew up here, and I am still considered an outsider. And that's what they saw on my board, that these were outsiders coming in. And it was hard. But then finally, I think it was like in our February board meeting, we had community members come in there, said, they knew we needed a new building. They said they supported the idea of a building, just not that one, and said, all right, what can we do now? How can we get this going? And I think that having that encouragement really helped to get us, me back on track, to get people, aboard then that would start working towards it again. So that's what I ended up doing. So it was great having them come and say that.
So where did you find the motivation to go again?
I think it was forced motivation, honestly, in the beginning, right? I mean, we lost the referendum in November. The director, who had been here for over 10 years, retired at the end of December. And then I became director probably at a time of the lowest morale amongst the staff and the board. So, and it definitely, there's a grieving process. I did not want to go to work. I wanted to stay in my bed and pull the covers up over my head and, you know, just whatever. And you can't do that. You know, it was kind of like that moment of like, oh crap, I'm it. Like, I have to do this. And so it was a combination, I think, for me personally, of fake it till you make it and pretend that you're happy and positive at work. And also realizing, though, at the end of the day, I mean, I call myself a library brat because I've only worked in libraries other than one really bad, regrettable decision to work in a mom and pop video store in the late 90s, 80s. And, you know, I believe in libraries. I believe that we're the cornerstone of a strong community. So we kind of had to start all over again. I knew we had to. I just needed to let the staff and myself and the board grieve and get through that to regroup and regain strength to say, okay, we made mistakes, but we're going to go try again.
Right. Pauline, I saw you nodding a lot when Lisa used the word grieving. What motivated you to do that?
Yes. Well, I realized how competitive I was too. I was like, I don't like to lose. And it was really, we had no choice because it was about our operational funding. And we did take, you know, a do or die kind of approach. And it was interesting because after the vote failed, people were suddenly like, you know, we lost our library one time before. And that reality was sinking in. And it was, you know, in a matter of days, there were people coming that just wanted to talk and wanted to know how they could help. And that really helped because, you know, you were seeing that there's a potential to really do this again. And we had to.
So, Pauline, you gave me a segue to the next question, which is, you know, now that you kind of found your personal motivation of how to keep going, how did people gather the troops to move forward once again? Julie, you had been talking earlier about you had almost a full turnover of your board of trustees, but you got to figure out how to pull this new group together to go forward to what you saw might be possible the next time around. How'd you do that?
Yeah, we had, of the 5 members on the board, 3 of them resigned, so there was only 2 left from the original board. So I ended up, and we had expanded the board at that point to 7. So I ended up going out and, you know, we obviously, anyone can run for our board, but I did reach out to a couple people that I thought would be, you know, to see if they would be interested and were willing to run. One of them happened to be the only woman ever in Highland to serve on the town board, and she was on it for 20 years. So she was someone that the community respected and was a mover and shaker of the community. And the other was a retired superintendent who had done a building project in Highland, then moved down to Long Island, did another building project there. And she was willing to also run for the board. So it was reaching out to the community, getting people I knew would be willing to do the work that was necessary and had the energy and the belief that, yes, you know, we needed this building and they were going to do whatever it took to work with me to make sure we got that building. So that's reaching out.
So Pauline, you mentioned kind of that do or die mentality, which was obviously very motivating to you. So what do you use to gather the troops together to follow you through that?
Well, upon your suggestion too, was like, you guys need to do a serious autopsy. So we interviewed a bunch of, you know, community members that voted for and against. And we really focused on the against. We wanted to know what their concerns were. We knew we had to control the message better. And getting that information was so essential to be able to move forward and really kind of have those answers right up front, but make them part of your messaging. And right out of the fence, we started doing that. So it was very helpful to see what went wrong.
The size of your committee, didn't you?
I'm sorry, what was that?
You added a lot more people to your committee the next time around, right? So you had, when you gathered the troops,
so many more. Yes, and that's what we really needed the first time is we needed hundreds of people, and we got them. And again, it's because they really realized, like, no kidding, we could lose our library. So that was a great motivator for everybody.
Matt, how about you? How did you gather the troops to move forward?
Well, there was like kind of that two phases, right? So we had the first loss, and then a lot of people showed up after that who said, "Oh my gosh, 30 votes! Let's make this better." And we had some motivation then for more people to help get the word out and spread the message. But when that second one went down, really we were in a space that we just did not. It wasn't working for us. The location we were in needed to change. It needed to be updated, and we had heard from the community during the design of that. The space that wasn't approved was, here's what we want in our next century library. These are the services we need. This is what we're missing. Things like a lack of mold, things like furniture that's comfortable, places for things like materials and stuff like those type of small issues needed to be addressed. And so the library was motivated to kind of try to provide that for the community, and also get out from under our landlord, who was not the best. So I mean, we definitely had some good reasons to kind of to hit the road, and that got people going. Like, hey, okay, we're not doing this fantastic thing that's going to be life-changing. We're going to go here and we're going to do this. But, people saw that there was going to be a really nice benefit to that at the end.
So Tim, you came in as a kind of a newer director and saw this opportunity, but how did you gather the troops to, who maybe had gone through that first failure, to actually have the oomph to follow you forward?
Well, I think part of that is that for 3, maybe 4 years after I became the director, we really didn't focus on any kind of a renovation or expansion. But what we did do in our messaging, we pointed out that we didn't so much blame anybody for losing the referendum, but we continued to say, hey, we need a new roof, and we need a new HVAC system, and we need new lighting. And all of that was supposed to be part of our project in 2012. So, we heard you. We didn't get your permission to build. So we went to work on those problems one at a time, got some good construction grant support from the state of New York, and some good support from our assembly member and our state senator. And we just started picking these things off one at a time. And I think we had some good luck, and we were able to promote the fact that we did a few of those projects due to market conditions less expensively than we thought. And so I think that kind of built a constructive spirit around the library. There were things happening at the library in terms of the facility. And then also our public services are excellent, and there was kind of a momentum that was building in the community for us.
Nice. So once you had this internal stakeholder group, maybe your board, volunteers to help you realize you could go forward and try something new, what were your first few tactical steps that you took to figure out how to proceed? Because Pauline mentioned that phrase, the autopsy, of really going back and figuring things, what could have gone better that last time around. Julie, you kind of took the same approach, didn't you? When you kind of got that group going and you had the oomph to do it again. What were some of your first few steps?
Yes, we started having, we had community meetings, but we started having more. We started attending more of the town board meetings as well, just so that we could get them on board a little bit, and just answering any questions people had, listening to what their concerns had been. Like I said, most of the people in the town felt we did need a better building because that one was falling down, but they just didn't agree with that project. So we started to listen to them and ask them, what was it about that project? And we heard that it was too big. The price was too high. They didn't like the fact that we hired an outside PR firm. They felt that money was wasted. We should have not used that. We should have done grassroots, which we did the second time. And they also felt we weren't doing enough fundraising. We had, but it wasn't perceived that we were. So we started doing more, and we started to make sure that any fundraising we did was very well publicized. And they saw that the board, it wasn't a lot of money, but just the fact that the board was trying other ways instead of just raising taxes went a long way to get the town behind us, the community behind us.
Well, Pauline, could you talk a little more about that post-vote analysis or autopsy that you did?
Yeah. We definitely, we had, our opposition was well organized and strong. And again, as I mentioned, it came from specific areas that in our service area and they seem to be the farther flung regions of our chartered service areas. So really getting the information from them as to what they didn't want. And they wanted to see us, we were hearing that some would consider if maybe we asked for less. So we did, we asked for less. And another thing was, you know, I don't use the services, why should I support it? So we knew we had to push what services we had and what you could do from afar. It really helped us in a lot of ways, because it really helped us moving forward with our strategic planning and like what kind of services do people want and need, not necessarily just in the building, but obviously how can you serve everyone? So those were key takeaways from the autopsy for sure. And also come out fighting. We needed to really not just think everybody loves libraries, because they don't. Not everyone.
Tim, how about you? What were your first few tactical steps? Tim, you're on mute.
Okay, thanks, Rebekkah. So we realized in 2017, as the year was dawning, that it was our 25th anniversary in this building, built in 1992, and that kind of a milestone might give us the opportunity to approach the community again. And by then, I'd been the director for 3.5 years, and I was able to articulate the problems with the building, the size problems with the building, as well as structural. So that helped. We did do tons and tons of focus groups and reaching out to the community, speaking to specific groups and so forth. And then a real key step for us is that we reached out to our opposition in the 2012 referendum, involved them in the process. And that was a several-part strategy. We invited a couple of them to give public programs in the library based on their professional expertise and thus experience rooms for what they could do for the community. And then ultimately the main person who had spearheaded the opposition, we asked him to be on our community committee to assess the needs of the library, and he accepted that offer. And honestly, he said, "Why are you asking me? I'm against this." And we said, basically, we want that voice because it's part of our community. We want the person who might serve as a little bit of a reality check sometimes when we think, oh, we should have a drive-through. Wait a minute, that might cost $3 million. So we said, you have a legitimate voice, let's use it as part of the process.
Thanks. Thanks, Tim. Matt, how about you? What were your first few tactical steps there?
Well, I think after the second time we went failed, the board knew that we weren't going to go back to that well. You know, that project has essentially, in the form that we were presenting it and all the work we'd done, we had to just put it aside. And they decided to hire and bring somebody in. Essentially, we brought in a real estate professional that's what he does, is he helps businesses find properties, commercial real estate. And the task to that person was, listen, we want you to take our map of our district and find every available, 18,000 to 20,000 square foot space that exists, that we could buy, that we could rent, or land that could support that sized, building, and come back to the board with that list. And we're just going to start visiting and checking off and essentially just regrouping from the beginning. And that work took about 2 years of working to find the space that we're currently in. And that space didn't exist. It wound up being 5 or 6 different units that we actually knocked down to form a contiguous space that we needed. But the fact was that the board saw that they needed some help. We brought that in, we found the right person to get us through. And the whole time though, and there's a whole nother presentation on demand at this conference called DIY Library Design, which talks about this entire thing, which is totally exciting, was that the staff was very involved with the design of this new space once it was found. So you can hear a little more about that at that other one.
Cool. So Lisa, what were some of your first few tactical steps there now that you're new the director? And here you go.
Here you go. Well, after I stopped quoting Nancy Kerrigan and crying, why, we which I'm making a joke, but really seriously, we had to get all those tears and frustration out before I could talk about it without crying, which would be totally embarrassing in a board meeting. So we invited the main vocal civic association leader. There were 3 civic association groups, but there was this one gentleman in particular who was the voice of the 3 of them, who was really, really at every single one of those aforementioned 12 community meetings that I thought were so good to do. And we wanted him to give us the feedback, like others on the panel said, like, okay, we're listening to you. Why do you think it failed? And he was very happy to tell us why he thought it failed. And part of it too, and you know, I'm glossing over some stuff obviously, but the school district, we had fences to mend with our school district. You know, I used to be a school librarian, and they used to joke that your 2 best friends are the secretary and the custodian. And, you know, if you're a school district public library, they might not be your best friends, but you better be on a good relationship, your board and that board. And so there were newspaper articles from the first vote of school board members quoting that they weren't voting yes, and they were totally against this and public about it. So we had to get them back on our side, or at least neutralize them. That was the goal, was to neutralize these 2 groups. We also, tough decision, knew that we respected that first firm that we hired, but obviously, again, there are politics within the village that were beyond our control. And so we needed to find a new firm to work with. And then we really had to backtrack. We didn't do a facility, kind of, again, Pollyanna, like everybody loves libraries. Everybody's going to support a bigger and better library. So we did an official facilities study, and the board spent money on that to see and list those numerous ADA and safety issues that, you know, it wasn't a want and it wasn't even really a need. We weren't following the law. You know, we had code violations. So we were able to show that to the community. And then I think the most important was, it wasn't just my project and it wasn't the board's project, and that I became active in the chamber, in Rotary, and Kiwanis, but staff members also stepped up to the plate, and they got involved in the PTAs, the Lindenhurst Cares Coalition, the Friends of the Library. And so that helped move things forward immensely.
So I'm going to combine the next 2 questions that we had planned for ourselves here and ask you each how you went about rebranding your project in a way that garnered more support, and what were some of the strategies that you deployed that were different the second time around. So Pauline, I'm going to start with you, because you had to really create more of a sense of urgency for people, because when people think about the stats of your voter turnout, that was impressive. Your yes vote turnout was immensely grown. So talk a little bit about how you changed your branding and your strategy.
So we did get strategic. Our approach was, how many votes do we need? And we settled based on, you know, the last 5-year voter turnouts on 3,000 people. We needed 3,000 votes. So we weren't going into the communities that had predominantly voted no. We were going to the yes, and we were focused completely on the yes. We addressed the no vote concerns as best we could, but we were strategic and competitive. We needed to get support from area and local leaders within those communities where we needed to focus our yes. We had, you know, our campaign committees were doing door to door, and they were really apprehensive about doing that the first time. And it became the greatest priority, was a talking campaign that you know, was everything from actually knocking on doors, but having people over at your house, talking at the local grocery store with 2 or 3 people. We had our board members doing that. We had people on the committees doing that. Just really making it, the community urgency needed to be there. We did get some feedback like, well, some of your stuff was glossy, but we got more back that people didn't know that they really should vote. So we really pushed. We had billboards, we had flash mobs, we had just way a different approach, even TV ads, video ads, whatever way. We were saying, like, no stone left unturned. Let's do everything. So we put our all into it, and it shows in the second voter turnout. You know, we I think it was something like 2,635, close to 3,000, close, you know. And so that energy focused in winning, you know, was, I think, the most helpful thing, especially given our timeline.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, what did you do about change in branding and campaign strategies your second time out?
So when I got to the library in 2015, they had just decided to stop mailing out a print newsletter and received a lot of complaints about that. And, you know, being part of the SLI too, that's always like the toss up, right? Like paper's bad, paper's good. But we got a new logo, completely new logo. We brought back a professionally designed and printed newsletter to mail home so that really we were controlling the message. I think that's what I learned the most, is that I always, in 2017, was surprised, and the surprises were all bad, right? Like you would pick up the phone and it would be Newsday. Now in 2019, I was calling Newsday to kind of control the message going forward, saying, hey, guess what? We're regrouping. We listened to people and we were able to make it more positive. Our friends of the library, there was none, and they really, they chartered in August or September of 2017. So, right, they were like a baby. They couldn't do anything in 2017, really. But by 2019, it was a small and mighty group, and I just love them to death. They fundraised like mad, and they mailed out 14,000 postcards saying vote yes and doing it. And I really wish I had spoken to Pauline in 2018-19 to think about a flash mob. But we just kept using that phrase, we heard you. And to use their words, right? To take the criticism that we got and to turn that into our rebranding, that you said this was too much. We lowered the cost. You said this was too flashy and showy. Look at how practical we're being. And so we just stayed in that lane and tried to lock it down.
Julie, how about you? What did you change about your branding and campaign strategy the second time around?
Basically, a lot of the same. We started going, like I said, to more of the town board meetings and actually going through the process, letting everyone see PowerPoints of every property we had looked at prior to where we were and why they weren't going to work, or, you know, what had happened, so that everyone was on board and knew that, okay, they have looked everywhere in this town. We scaled the project back. The property we ended up getting had never been on the available before. It was owned by the Catholic Church, and once the Catholic school closed, they didn't want to. The Archdiocese wanted them to get rid of the school, but the parish didn't want to. But they did sell. Were willing to sell us the 2-acre lot. So. Which was helpful to actually have the parish on board, because they also were talking about it and helping us to get the vote out. And like Lisa, our friends had grown by that time. We had started in 2010. I think we had maybe 5 members of the friends at the first vote. The second time we had more. There's a community retirement apartment complex that they were very good at getting those people to come and vote. They rent, they don't have taxes, and that's what they kept telling each other throughout the community complexes. You don't pay taxes, you should go vote yes for the library, and that was a big help. And just listening to the questions. The first time around, the company we work with didn't want us to answer questions that came up at public meetings. We did not feel that was a good idea, but we followed what we were being told by the professionals. The second time we did. If you had a question, we were up in the front of the room, we would answer your questions, we would respond to you right then. We got in touch with everybody who lives near this property, because it is in a residential neighborhood, made sure they were able to attend any public meetings we had, so we could alleviate any concerns they had about lighting, noise, traffic, whatever, and just always keep them included. And we tried to make sure that the community felt like this was their library. We heard you, we are doing what you want us to do, what you've asked us to do, this is your library. And I think that went a long way.
Definitely did, Julie. Tim, how about you? What lessons did you take forth to change your branding and your campaign strategy the second time?
So a lot of what I'll say echoes my colleagues here. We did a lot of outreach and a lot of listening. We recruited people to sit in focus groups related to things like homeschoolers or real estate agents, and many more. Brought them into the library, talked to them about what they think a library should be and what they need and so forth. And then we called all sorts of existing community groups and asked to speak at their meetings. And that was a good thing too. I mean, we're well over 30 such groups, a lot of neighborhood associations and so forth. The other thing we did that some of my colleagues did here is we actually joined those groups you know, became contributing members to their food drives and so forth, you know, and integrated ourselves into the community more so than we had in the past. I think I feel a little tenuous, but it may have been the case that we thought that we were really, really a great organization and other people should come to us. And then we flipped that around and said, if we're such a great organization, let's show people by coming to them how great we are. And then related to some of my colleagues here, we also chose not to use a professional PR firm the second time around because that we were roundly criticized for it. It cost, I believe, $50,000 in 2012 to do that. So there was a cost savings right there. And also we had, through our foundation in 2012, sent out 4 large postcard mailers, and we were criticized for that. So we sent out 1. And then at each of those community meetings, we emphasized those points. We heard you, as one of my colleagues said, so we're doing it differently this time.
Tim, something that caught my attention about your second time around is that you did an Ask Me Anything offer leading up to the vote. Can you mention what you did there?
Well, yeah, I've always been intrigued by pole sitters. So these are people who might sit on the roof of a building or on a telephone pole until, you know, their team wins the World Series or whatever. And I think there's a library book, a kid's library book about a librarian who did that somewhere. But anyway, I wanted to do a similar kind of thing, but my roof didn't work for that. So I took one of our meeting rooms for every hour that we were open, 10 a.m. to 9 p.m., the 2 days prior to the referendum. And I said, I will be in this room all day, every day. We've gone to all of your groups. Now come to us with your last minute questions. And it sounds kind of silly in a way, like actually only about 15 people came in each day, but those people who didn't come in might have thought that 200 people came in all day long, right? So I was able to get, I think, some votes from among those 15 people who came in each day, but it's sort of the optics really of making a move like that I think worked in that case.
Nice. So I'm going to boil our next few questions down to really just one more question for all of you, and then we'll open it up for questions. But what advice would you have for people facing their next budget vote? What are some things that like you wish you knew ahead of time or that you learned the hard way through this process? What's that one piece of advice you would give people? I'm going to start with Lisa.
I would do, if I could do it over again, I would have done a deep dive into the history of this library. You know, I can't think that growing up in libraries meant I knew everything about libraries, right? They're each their own unique individual entity. So I feel like if I had done that in 2017, I would have understood the community better, reach out to other library leaders who have experienced a referendum or building project. I'm a huge proponent of mentors. I count Rebekkah and Nat on that list. So, and just remembering that, like, as a library leader, you're the cheerleader for the staff and the community to project we can do this, but you also need to find a backroom colleague or two to share your insecurities with, to allow you to mentally work through them so that you can stay publicly in that cheerleader mode. You know, there was lots of times where I was like, we could do it. And then I was in my office like, we can't do it. So that's my advice, is go talk to other people and just find somebody that can give you some mentorship and advice.
Nice. Matt, how about you? What advice would you give to your peers in the audience here today?
I would say the first step is to buy as much substances that you need to get through. And I would say stockpile that first. Lock up any weaponry that you have around in your office or elsewhere. But really, I think you have to practice. You have to take care of yourself in almost every capacity. There's a spiritual breaking of this process because of the exact things Lisa just said. You are that figurehead, and so when you walk into those spaces, Like Tim said, it's the optics, it's what people see. When you are taking the flashlight and saying, put it on us, it is you, right? So your attitude, your philosophy, your take on life. When someone hits you with something, you know that they're waiting in the audience and they're going to cut that gotcha thing. They want to see the little tear form in the corner of your eye and that your heart starts to explode and break. And while you want to crawl over the seat and choke that thing out, you will step back and take it in, and you will find that inner calm, and you'll do rage yoga later. So the fact is I think you need to find what those things are that bring you joy and centeredness and peace and harmony. And I wish I'd done that better. No, I mean, I think that I was able to find that through my experience, but it was a challenge. It wasn't like, oh, this will work great and I can handle this and I'll just slough it off and it'll be okay. I think I realized that I had to find some avenues for making sure that I was taking care of myself as much as I was there to give to staff and boards and volunteers and all the other constituent groups that you have to communicate with, which is more than you'll ever do outside of a building project. And if you actually get the money, then actually that's when the work starts, which is scary in its own right. But you need the money first.
So when Matt was describing the finding the inner calm in the public Q&A session, I immediately envisioned Julie. So I went to a lot of Julie's public sessions, both for the first and second vote. So Julie, can you give some advice to the audience today of things that you wish you knew ahead of time, things you learned through the process, or things you learned about yourself?
Yeah, you really need to have a thick skin. You can't let, you have to realize that while it feels very personal, it's not you that they're really attacking, even though it feels like that at the time. And you have to, as Matt says, take deep breaths. Don't try not to roll your eyes too much at them or at all. And just, you're almost like a politician. You have to be diplomatic. You have to respond, hear them, make sure that they know you are hearing them, and also make the connections throughout the community, and really listen to what your community responds to. You need someone that you can go and cry to and scream with and carry on. And sometimes my husband probably was not always happy at night, but he was there, and so we're friends and staff, and you need that. You need to be able to vent when you need to after these public meetings. But at the meetings, you do be a politician, which didn't know that was part of librarianship, but it is.
I'm having so many flashbacks right now, Julie. I can't even tell you.
Me too, Beck, and I don't want to ever go there again.
Pauline, how about you? What advice do you have for people? What things do you wish you knew ahead of time? What did you learn about yourself through the process?
Definitely, everyone has pointed out that in being emotionally prepared, but I do wish, like in retrospect of everything, I would have sat down and had a couple of drinks with a director who had a failed vote. What I was doing was always reaching out to people who had winning votes, and you really do gain more from knowing what can really go wrong. And so in hindsight, I wished I would have done that. And I wished I would not have underestimated opposition. And like bringing them under wing first and foremost. And then, by God, you better have a press conference that you set up right out of the fence. So,
first out of the gate. Tim, how about you? What are some tips you have for people, advice, things you learned about yourself through the process?
Sure. So again, combining some thoughts here. One thing about second attempts is that you know the nature of your opposition, and that's for the people listening who have lost a vote. You know what to work on and where to shore up your defenses and your offense going forward. For those who are contemplating a vote who've never done it before, it's good that you went to this session. You need to kind of anticipate, and that's hard, I understand. So the other thing I would say about winning is you need to be open, you need to be sincere and available. You need to firmly believe your message. If you're going to question yourself, do it after hours, as some of my colleagues have said here. Don't equivocate. You need to go to them. You need to get out of the library and into other parts of the community. And lastly, you need to find a way to tell some great stories about your library. My quick example, we were so lucky, but we had a young man who checked out one library book, and it happened to be on Bitcoin. And he read it, and he got involved in Bitcoin. And a year later, he had over 10,000 people paying him for his monthly newsletter, thoughts on where the Bitcoin market was going. He's driving a nice car around town, and he said, sure, I'll let you use my story. So that kind of a story, which appeals to the more conservative side of the community. It's not about, sitting down and reading the Canterbury Tales in your retirement. It's about how the library can help you in a practical way. Focus on that.
Thank you. So many of you mentioned that you thought one of your biggest piece of advice was to talk to people who have been through this before, and you've all offered yourself to people in the audience that they want to connect with you. You said, go ahead, put my email address out there. So I'm doing it right now. So now everyone's got contact information for the panel. Now, I think Bree might have some questions for the audience for us. And before we get to those, I just want to again thank the panel for reliving a tough time, but also I think a really exciting time for them when they finally arrived at what their final state was. So again, thank you to our panel. So Bree, do you have questions for the panel or myself?
I think, as all of you told me right from the get-go before we got started, I think you were so thorough. We have more thanks and more posts of gratitude of your transparency and your ability to persevere and share your experiences. So I don't see any questions, but a whole lot of clap emojis, a whole lot of posts of appreciation.
Excellent. So I'll just wrap up then and again say thank you to our panel. But my advice anytime that you go out for a vote is no regrets. You want to have no regrets the next day. Go all in. And if you're not sure what that looks like, talk to people like the ones you just met today on the panel, because they've been there. They've been there twice actually sometimes. And you can learn a lot from people in New York who have gone through this. And just like you probably learned throughout the NYLA conference, people in NYLA are very generous with their knowledge. So take advantage of that. And we wish you the best of luck in the future for your library.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you to our panelists and to everyone that attended the comeback presentation. And thank you all for attending our very first and perhaps our only all virtual conference. So thank you. Have a wonderful weekend. And again, thank you for coming the last 2 days. We so appreciate it.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.